It's time to turn to the WUKY sports page with your host, Keith Elkins, revealing conversations and stories you thought you knew from prominent Kentucky sports figures. Now, here once again is Keith Elkins.
Sean Woods is with us today. He's a member of the UK Athletics Hall of Fame and is one of four players who, as a group, are known as the Unforgettables. Sean, John Pelphrey, Richie Farmer, and Deron Feldhaus were at Kentucky in the late 80s when there was a coaching change and a probation period, and they all decided to stay at UK for their entire college careers and eventually led the team to an NCAA regional final in 1992, the first year that Kentucky was allowed to compete in the NCAA tournament following the probation period. And, of course, Sean went on to coach in college and at Morehead State and Southern University and also at Mississippi Valley State. So he has had a long career in basketball and still very much involved in the game. Sean, it's great to have you with us. Thanks.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Unforgettables first. It's the thing that you and the other three are going to be most known for. It's going to stay with you, and obviously with a label like Unforgettables, people remember who you are and what you did. But tell me what that means to you now, as it's been more than 30 years.
I go back to my senior year when Pat Riley came and talked to us about making us a difference. Being a Kentucky basketball player gives you an opportunity to make a difference in especially the Commonwealth of Kentucky's lives. Well, he said that man's biggest fear is fear of extinction, fear of going through life without making a certain impact on someone or something. And for us, four guys, including the others that was on our team too, who was just as much responsible for the success that we had those 3 years, it's big for us. You know, it couldn't have happened in a more perfect scenario. You got three guys who dreamed about playing at the University of Kentucky, never knew that it was going to happen. Every last one of them was a strain as far as were they coming here or not. Maybe not Deron Feldhaus, but Pell, they kind of took their time with him, from what I understand. Richie, they took their time with him. Wasn't sure if they wanted to take him, in-state kid. And myself, my family's born here. I mean, the whole side of my mom's family's from here. So I always love Kentucky basketball because blue was my favorite color. Second of all, I fell in love with Wildcat Lodge. Third of all, I got to know and see the life of these guys as a youngster, and I wanted to be a part of that. And my dream came true too. So when everything happened from a probation standpoint, the investigation and things like that, we all had an opportunity, had a chance to leave. But in our mind and in our hearts, no matter what was going on, if we just had a chance to wear the big blue, no matter what the circumstances were, we were going to give it our heart and soul because this is where we wanted to be. And I think God had a way of really paving a way for us to make a certain impact because our hearts were truly into Kentucky basketball. We never had a foot out, never looked at another school, no matter what the circumstances were while being here. Mm-hmm. And it was really a true passion and a true exception and appreciation to wear that uniform and to run out in Rupp Arena and to be considered one of the greatest in the state of Kentucky. So that was big for us. And it all happened because everything was pure. It didn't matter if Coach Pitino came here or not. It was just he was probably the right person to get us where we needed to be at the right time. But you're going to still get the same effort. You're still going to see the same passion. And for us, from a pride standpoint, we always thought and knew that we were better than what people gave us credit for. If we weren't, we wouldn't have had the success that we had being here. So from that, I am truly grateful. And, when I come back, my chest sticks out. I don't care when I'm coaching, it always comes back, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And, we are labeled as that, it's who we are. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I wouldn't.
Was it, in fact, a collective decision? You get your heads together and decide, yeah, we're all on the same page here, or did you each individually make that decision?
We all individually made that decision. Those guys dreamed about it. I mean, come on. They grew up in the mountains.
Sure.
Every kid in the mountain wants to play Kentucky basketball. They still turn they watch the TV, turn the volume down, and listen to K-Wood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they dreamed about K-Wood calling their names. And guess what? Those three guys got an opportunity for K-Wood to call their names, and it was his last call.
It was his last game, yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the script couldn't have ended more better than that.
Mm-hmm.
On that type of situation. Now, if we'd have won the national championship, that would have been icing on the cake. But they've won 3 national championships since 1992. And we're still the most popular team in Kentucky basketball history because of the significant impact that we made. And also, I truly agree, believe, and everyone else does too, that today's basketball we paved the way for it. Mm-hmm. We made Kentucky basketball very, very attractive, very fun to play at. It made John Calipari make this his dream school because of what was going on, what we had going on with Coach Pitino. And this place is second to none. And if you do right by this, you'll be squared away for the rest of your life. And we did right by everything that was supposed to be and what we were supposed to do and how we were supposed to carry ourselves as a Kentucky basketball player.
You've mentioned the family ties, which, of course, were crucial to your college decision. You played your high school ball in Indianapolis. But tell me a little more about the family ties, because that not only were their loved ones here, but you spent a lot of time here, too, didn't you?
My mom's born and raised here.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's born and raised in Lexington, right here down here on Georgetown Street,
mm-hmm.
Right across the street from Douglas Park, Roosevelt Boulevard. But the whole side of my family started out in Uttingertown, out Winchester Road. That's where my family was started. Most of my family were in the horse business. They were my uncles and grandfather were either exercise riders or groomsmen. So even that runs deep. Horse racing runs deep in my family and in my soul. So everything about the state of Kentucky, the 2 best things about Kentucky is what? Kentucky basketball
and horses.
Right? Okay, and all my family loves to drink bourbon, so all 3 of them come together.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But it was a win-win for me because my grandmother used to always drive up to Indianapolis every weekend to watch me play. And I told her, whether it's in college or pro, you will be able to watch. I'm gonna make sure that you get to watch me every single night without having to go travel a whole bunch and whole 9 yards. Well, Kentucky started recruiting me right after my sophomore year, and there was nobody else had a chance. Bob Knight, I had all those opportunities, but my mind was set from day one to come to Kentucky. But I had to play the political thing because I was an Indiana basketball player. I did want to have an opportunity to be Mr. Basketball, and it didn't happen. But still, I got an opportunity to play, and with one of my best friends, which was Sean Kemp. Unfortunately, his stay didn't last very long, but we both knew that this is where we wanted to be. And fortunate for him, he didn't get to play here, but he got to play in the NBA. Fortunate for me, I did get to play here, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Let's go back a little bit to your start in basketball because, as mentioned, you played high school ball in Indianapolis. But before that, you were playing basketball or getting started in basketball up in the East Chicago area, right?
East Chicago, Gary, Indiana area. They call it the region where it's rich in high school basketball with East Chicago, Washington, East Chicago, Roosevelt, Gary Roosevelt. It has been a lot of tradition up there, and basketball has always been the mainstay of the fabric of my life because that's what I was introduced to. I was just as good in baseball, just as good in football, but basketball is looked at different when you grow up in the region up there in Northwest Indiana. And there's been some great players to come out of there too that everybody knows, but I've been fortunate in my basketball life to see great basketball, know what great basketball is, how you play basketball. And, I've taken it to, where I am now as far as coaching is concerned. And I'm an old schooler, you know what I mean? I like things to be done the right way. I was taught the right way. And, things have changed a little bit, but still the purity of basketball will never change.
And tell me about your experience there in East Chicago as you began to get into the game. I mean, you're participating, no doubt, on school teams, but playing a lot on your own, I guess, too.
Oh, man, every park back then, we were playing, but I was different. Every major player, the best players always set themselves apart, where I always wanted to set myself apart from everybody else when it came to basketball because I loved it that much. There would be 6 o'clock in the mornings where I'm out in the park by myself before anybody gets up to even come out to the park to play. I love for my dad to take me to watch East Chicago Roosevelt and East Chicago Washington play. I grew up, my dad used to take me to Chicago where I used to watch Isaiah Thomas and Mark Aguirre play. Mm-hmm. And I thought Chicago basketball was crazy because they had the round backboards. They didn't have the square backboards. But I got a chance to see Isaiah Thomas play at St. Joe. I got a chance to see Isaiah Thomas and Mark Aguirre play against each other. I got to see, I was born the same year that East Chicago Roosevelt won the state championship with James Bradley and Pete Turkovich. James Bradley and who else? He was the mainstay on that team then. And then you got East Chicago Washington with Junior Bridgman, Pete Turkovich, Tim Stoddard, the Darnell Adales. That was just so. And then here come Gary with, Coach Ron Heflin at Gary Roosevelt with Ronaldo Thomas and Winston Garland, whose son plays with the Cleveland Cavaliers now, Darius Garland. So it was always, high school basketball was like the pros. Even though Chicago was just 30 minutes away, high school basketball in that area was just supreme. The Bulls weren't very good. They had, Norm Van Leer, they had Nate Thurman, then here comes Reggie Theus, and all of a sudden, as soon as I move away in 1983-84, they drafted a young man by the name of Michael Jordan, who I never got to see play because I moved away to Indianapolis, playing for the Bulls. But it was just such a intense era and an intense environment because it was so competitive. Every kid wanted to be really, really good playing basketball. And some people say the best thing ever happened to me was moving to Indianapolis, where I was already downstate, where, only one team in that region could get to downstate just to play in the state tournament, where I'm playing in Indianapolis all the time, where it's more, notoriety, more exposure. And I took advantage of it. When I moved to Indianapolis, I still was, at my age, the best player. And because I thought different. Growing up in Gary makes you tougher. Growing up in East Chicago makes you more competitive. And it's a raging competitiveness that still is in my soul. And it's different from anybody I've ever played with, especially now coaching kids. I had to change it because I thought everyone who wanted to be great had to have that same mentality. It's not a rage like a violent, but it's a rage of a super competitiveness that I grew up with. And I wouldn't have made it out if I didn't have that. And by me being one of the best, that means that my rage was more than everybody else's rage, which you would think by me saying this was more dangerous. No, it was just me more determined to become a star and put in the work than anybody else. I didn't want nobody else to outwork me. My goal was anybody my age, they couldn't be better than me. So then when you get to high school and you kind of set yourself up. When I got to Indianapolis, and all of a sudden now I'm a national prospect. Now I get to play against the nation's best, coming from their state, Sean Kemp and I. And it got to another level where it showed me that there's some other players just like me. And it was refreshing, the eye-opener, so I knew I had to come back and get, tighten up some of my bootstraps to stay afloat nationally now that I've become statewide as good. And I took that with me, and that's why we were who we were at the University of Kentucky and reason why I was who I was at Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. And I think our friends in Kentucky will appreciate us stepping aside to talk about some Indiana high school basketball for a few minutes. They appreciate that too. The basketball is great here, but it's they know what a tradition it is in Indianapolis and that in Indiana overall, and that is where they set the movie. So that's
no doubt about it. Hoosiers and
thing, yeah.
The Hinkle Feldhaus. I mean, I had a chance to play my sectionals and regional semi-state in Hinkle Feldhaus. I was in Indianapolis. Butler University and Hinkle Feldhaus was probably 6 blocks from my house. So I got to really see it for what it really was instead of hope and dream that I get to play in that. And by the time I got to high school, the state tournament was moved to Market Square Arena. But still, the fact that I'm in the mix downstate in the state capitol and I'm one of the top guys was where I wanted to be.
Well, having grown up in Bedford, Indiana myself, I saw another angle, you might say, of the Hoosier basketball tradition, where the smaller communities and in some cases the rural communities celebrate the game, just as much as anybody, and play hard and compete. Didn't always have a lot of success in competing against some of those teams from some of the places you mentioned, but still the game is very much beloved. And we had an old gym there in Bedford that went back to 1926, and then I graduated in 1970, and Jim Bradley was Mr. Basketball from East Chicago, but we were still playing in that old gym, and so it's a great part of the tradition of Indiana basketball. I did want to ask you, on behalf of my hometown friends, you had a bit of a rivalry in high school with Damon Bailey, who is the legend from our area.
No doubt about it. Damon Bailey is the Richie Farmer of Indiana.
Yeah.
Had a historical high school basketball career, and I was fortunate enough to play with him on our AAU team. We, the best of Indiana, even though he was a little younger, he played with us. And you're talking about Bedford, a small town. Those were my toughest games because there was so much pride in there. And also, as well as I do, the referees were probably from that hometown when you were playing at their place. But the first year we played against Damon Bailey.
This was against Bedford North Lawrence.
Bedford North Lawrence, yeah. We beat him by 30. We killed him. The next year, my senior year, we played at North Bedford. I got 4 fouls 3 minutes in the game. I knew we had no chance. And they ended up beating us. Damon had a really good game that game too. But, the fact that you're enriched with Indiana high school basketball is huge. Unfortunately, they classed it and kind of took away some of the steam, some of the rivalries, some of the the regions, like the Northwest Conference, North Central Conference with Marion and, all those teams, Anderson, and you got the Garrydale now. Because they classed it, it changed the dynamics of Indiana high school basketball, which it changed the pride because you weren't playing the same teams as your rivals anymore. East Chicago Roseville, East Chicago Washington, they merged. So now that rivalry's gone. There's no Gary Roosevelt anymore. Gary Westside is pretty much and I think that's it, the only public school left in the city of Gary. So those high school, you go to a game now when it was standing room only, you can get in there and hardly nobody's there anymore. It's different. Kentucky still has a 1 state champion, which that makes their deal, still what it is. Where Indiana it's not the same bite anymore because you got 4 or 5 classes now. You're not playing the same people. It's like everybody gets a chance to win a state championship, no matter what level, what size school you are. Well, guess what? Back in the day, all the smaller schools were the schools that were winning the state championship in Indiana. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
But what it did was it actually let the bigger schools win more state championships now because of the class. So things have changed in the state of Indiana. I'm still I'm part of the Indiana High School Basketball Hall of Fame Centennial team, and but it's my ride has been good. My ride has been really, really good, and I'm thankful and grateful and blessed to be around such a tradition, such passion for the game of basketball from a young pup to now that nobody can really tell me about this game anymore because I've seen it from every angle. I can take you in a barbershop. I can take you to a social club in East Chicago, and they can tell you everything that you want to hear about the history of high school basketball in the state of Indiana, especially in the region. That's why I like going up there just to hear those stories.
You played in the Kentucky-Indiana All-Star Series, which has been a great series. At one time, it drew packed houses in Indianapolis and Louisville. You played in the 1988 series. Tell me about that experience and what that meant. The series was beginning to evolve a little bit as players got more opportunities to play in different All-Star games, but it was still pretty big then, wasn't it?
No doubt about it. Back then, you could only play in 2 All-Star games, including your Indiana All-Star game team deal, or 3. And, normally, we were all Americans too, so we had to choose what games we wanted to play in. Well, I didn't get picked. I was an alternate for the McDonald All-American game, but I had an opportunity to play in the McDonald's Derby Classic game in Louisville. But being an Indiana All-Star is like almost being a Kentucky basketball player. That's a privilege. And in Indiana, it's still that way. Kentucky, not so much. But, Indiana owns the series. Of course, I'm sorry. I know I'm a Kentucky Wildcat. I'm not a Kentucky high school basketball player, so I don't feel sorry for Kentucky high school basketball. But Indiana high school basketball has dominated that series, and we dominated that series. I think we won. I can't remember. You got it right here. I think we won by 21 and they had Richie Farmer, James Brewer, a couple others, but we had Sean Kemp. Every last person on our Indiana high school all-star team got a Division I scholarship. Sean Kemp, myself, Deron went to Louisville. Chandler Thompson who won the state championship at Muncie Central, went to Ball State. Woody Austin, who was Mr. Basketball that year, went to Purdue. Matt Nover went to Indiana. You had a couple other. One went to Florida, Miami of Ohio, so on and so forth. It was just a unique situation. You come together for 2 weeks. You play a game 1 week. You practice that next week. You played another game, whether it's here or we played in Louisville at the time, jam-packed. Then we played Mark Square Arena. I was so disappointed when I went to my first Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game since I played, and it was held at Lexington Catholic this past year. Mm-hmm. And it was the sorriest situation I had ever seen. There were maybe 500 people in the stands watching an Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game.
Yeah.
So that tells me that the respect and the tradition of Kentucky basketball has changed, unfortunately. But when you go back, and you can't even, there's no use to playing it at Freedom Hall or Rupp Arena anymore. Where you still, when you go to Indiana, you still play at not Market Square Arena, but wherever the Pacers play, or even if you play it at the Hinkle Fieldhouse, you're still getting 7,000 to 8,000. Whereas when I played, we got 14,000, 15,000, either both places. So I hope that tradition I hope that they can get the thing back, because I don't want that series to end. And it's ending more on the Kentucky side, high school basketball, more so on the Indiana side. And I'm sensing that the lack of pride with Kentucky high school basketball more so than Indiana basketball, because Indiana high school basketball is embedded in the state. That's huge. Here, not so much anymore. And Kentucky has to get that back. And there's some good high school players here that don't get the notoriety. There's people here that used to know about Kentucky high school basketball players, don't know nothing about them anymore. I didn't know one kid, except for the 2 kids that were supposed to play in the game that they're at Kentucky now, and one of them didn't even play. That tells me right there that the pride from a Kentucky All-Star basketball standpoint has sizzled a little bit, because there's no way you a Kentucky basketball player, you sign in Kentucky, and you're not representing your state in the border state game, which is the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game. That left a bad taste in my mouth from a Kentucky standpoint. They got to get better at that as far as really promoting high school basketball. And now, I'm going to try to do my part. I'm working with Glycott this year, covering games and things like that. And I'm going to mention that a lot. And I'm going to challenge these, and you want your kids to have notoriety, and you want them to have an opportunity to be recruited by different Division I schools, even Kentucky for that matter. But if nobody knows you, you don't make a significant impact. Richie Farmer doesn't come here if Kentucky basketball is the way it is right now, because nobody knows who Richie Farmer is. They don't see him very much, and that was a big deal. Richie Farmer was looking just as much towards being a Kentucky All-Star, just as much as he was looking forward to wearing that big blue the following year, and that has to change.
Well, the All-Star Series represents it's in June, so it kind of represents a last hurrah for high school players in their high school career. So you move on then. Now you're at UK, and the year that you had to sit out is a year when all kinds of things happened. 88, 89 year.
And this is how bad I wanted to play at Kentucky. The deal started before I even got here. You know, the investigation, the NCAA coming to my high school, questioning me, asking me things about what happened when on my visit. I did nothing wrong. I received nothing. But I loved not only Kentucky, but Eddie Sutton, Dwayne Casey was my guy. You know, James Dickey was my guy. I really grew fond of them. And it was just an unfortunate situation that year. And that was the first time, you know, once I got here, and we had probably had the worst season in years.
Many
the year
years.
I set out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was, for the first time, at a crossroads with my basketball life, not knowing what I wanted to do. Did I want to stay here and withstand the penalties that was, you know, given to us at that particular time? The people who I came here to play for were no longer here. I had no relationship with the coaching staff that was coming. I knew of Rick Pitino, watched him at Providence. I know Delray Brooks pretty well because he was a co-Mr. Basketball with Troy Lewis. He started at Indiana and went to Providence and went to the Final Four. That's the only thing I knew about Coach Pitino. I knew I liked the style, you know, pressing and running and shooting threes, but I didn't know him. So I called my mother once the verdict came back that we were going to get everything but the death penalty. And I said, can you know, we need to start looking at some other schools. You know, can you call some other schools that was recruiting me? And I was thinking about going back to Purdue. And she said, no. I said, no. I said, why not? I said, you won't get to see me play on television unless you're going to have to come to every game, which she was going to come to anyway. I don't get a chance to play on national television. I don't get a chance to play for a national championship. Those were three of the things that what really drew me to the University of Kentucky, because we were always top in the country as far as national exposure. I have an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. That was the mainstay. And she said no. And I said, why not? She goes, this is the first time that you're going to have to face some adversity as an adult, as a man, and you're going to face it, and you're going to try to figure it out. So I was sad, didn't take it real well, and I'm walking around moping, and Marta McMacken, who was the secretary for men's basketball at the time for a long time, she brought me in and she sat me down for about an hour and a half, and she talked to me about the reasons why I should stay at the University of Kentucky. Marta McMacken was the sole reason, beside my mom not giving me a chance, for me to stay here. And she said, I promise you that it'll work out for you. Well, as a 19-year-old kid, you're not looking at it that way. And she knew more than I did because my jerseys were retired. Mm-hmm. You know, I played with three other guys. We were living legends. And, you know, I got to play. My fondest friends are my teammates because we went through so much. Being a Kentucky Wildcat, that I wouldn't change it for the world. It was the best decision I ever made in my life.
And you knew about Rick Pitino, his coaching style. You knew some of the guys who were associated with him. But then you get a face-to-face meeting with him, and you start playing for him. What was that
Well,
like?
the first time I met him, he came. I was playing in the Olympic Festival out in Oklahoma. The United States Olympic Festival was held out there. And he came out there and watched me play, and I had a heck of a game too. He and Herb Sendak. And he met, and I'm thinking, hey, you know, he's happy, you know, that he's inheriting a team that at least got a pretty good point guard, promising. The first thing he asked me was, could I run 2 miles in 12 minutes? I said, what? I'm saying to myself, why would you ask me that? And I didn't ask that question, but I did ask him, could Billy Donovan do it? And he said yes. And I said, well, if Billy Donovan could do it, I can do it. And evidently, I came off a little brash. So that first meeting, I'm sure in his mind, he was like, who is this cocky little young guy I think he is? You know, he's going to say if Billy Donovan could do it, he can do it. And Billy Donovan just led me to the Final Four. Well, that's how I thought. That was my the confidence that I had. And it might have rubbed me the wrong way, but at least he knew that he had somebody that wasn't scared, that can compete, and that, you know, and thought he was just as good as anybody in the United States. That was our first meeting. And then after that, I get back from the Olympic Festival, and I meet Rock Oliver. We meet. I'm tired, just getting off the plane. And Rock had these things called, they look like lawnmowers, but it was a ladder or something with tension. You can change the tension in it, and it was called the Coach's Buddy. He called it the Coach Buddy. and it was like pushing a car in neutral. So he said, let me work you out. I want, he's bored probably, no players around. He's just now getting in town, being the strength coach, was just dying to probably work somebody out. And I just happened to be the first one to walk in there. And nobody's in town yet. I'm in town. And he makes me do this 21 times down and back. He said, now, you think you're going to need some, a couple of dumpsters to throw up? I'm looking at him like, you're not going to make me throw up. I may not feel like doing this, but I'm not throwing up. First time you meet me, you're not going to break me down. I did it. And I was determined to prove him wrong. I got done. I'm winded. I'm sitting over there and we're talking. And I'm starting to spit. And you know that feeling. And I'm thinking to myself, come on now. I'm not going to throw up in front of this guy. Not the first time he meets me. Well, me being who I am, he puts the garbage can all the way on the other side, And I said, I ain't going to need it. 5 minutes into that conversation after we were done, that garbage can looked like it was an oasis. It looked like it was so far, and it was just on the other side of the court. I got to it just in time to get everything out of me that I had put in my body from that morning on that plane ride till the time I got to Lexington. And I was so mad at myself because I thought that he was going to think I was soft because he broke me down and I threw up. The fact that I did it, and I did it 21 times, there hadn't been no one, not in my playing career, working for Rock, who was able to do that. But that was our breakdown deal. And that was my introduction to the staff.
Well, yeah, I've heard you say that a player, almost all coaches are tough in their own way, but you have to, as a player, work through that. And I've heard you say that only a couple of reasons why the coach gets on you. One is you weren't paying attention and you made a mistake because you weren't paying attention, and the other one was that you were hustling. And so you figured if you can do both of those things, pay attention to we all make mistakes, but pay attention and cut down on them. And if you hustled the whole way, that would be your best way to deal with a tough coach. Is that right? Have I got that right?
That was right. You're trying to stay out of this man's wrath because he would make up something just to get you. He's the best motivator I've ever been around. He's the smartest man I've ever been around. We're talking about Coach Pitino here. And it was tough, There's no way you can coach guys like we were coached back then. And, I mean, we all know that because times have changed. It's affected my coaching career. But we went through so much that we were scared to lose. But we were in the best shape of anyone in the country. We may not have looked it. We never passed the eye contest in the layup line. But by God, once that ball went up, the first 5 minutes, you knew that, man, these dudes is something else. They're almost like machines. We never got tired. We were relentless pressing, shooting threes. A lot like what Mark Pope is doing now, except for it's not as intense. His style of play is not as intense or as violent as we were. Pressing, being the aggressor, creating tempo from our defense, wearing people down, then shooting threes in our face because Coach Pitino is the one who made the three relevant. Now teams run plays 80% of the time to get a three, more so than to get it inside. If you watch college basketball now, very seldom do you throw the ball inside and let your post player go to work or go inside to out. You know what I mean? You're bringing post players up to the high post now instead of the low post. So times have changed. But Coach Pitino did that, and we had the right team, just like Pope has the right team with Reggie Hansen, who can stretch you out. John Pelphrey, who was a big at the time, Feldhaus, they became three-point shooters. Deron Feldhaus averaged over 25 points against Shaquille O'Neal for a career for 3 years because Shaq wouldn't go out and guard him. So we were outscoring people, maybe not getting more field goals. We were probably creating more field goals off our defense, but we were one who really made the three-point shot real relevant, and he started that with Providence. And now look at the game. This team right here is almost a splitting image of our 1989-90 team, just by the way they play, the personnel that they have, the way they score, the liabilities that they have from a rebounding standpoint because they're not very big or physical. So you got to do other things and have other nuances to offset to allow you to outscore the other team. and Mark gets that from Coach, and that's very refreshing right now. But it was different. It was tough, but that's the reason why us four guys are as close as we are, because we went through war and we came out on the other side. We were scathed and had cuts and things like that. But those wounds really, really brought a lot of excitement and happiness to the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Oh, they really did. That 89-90 season, it's hard to imagine Kentucky fans being happy or excited about a team that won half the games. It finished at 500. But the expectations were that you wouldn't win anywhere near half your games when people looked at the roster and saw what was there for Pitino in his first year. But at the same time, you not only won, you won in a very entertaining and exciting fashion. You're working so hard, and Pitino's tough on you. Was it fun to win 14 games? I mean, what was that like for you?
No, we were scared to lose.
Okay.
Because he even says it right now. He's the worst loser in the world, in which he is. And that's not a bad thing. That's the reason why he's so successful, because he drives himself so much that losing just makes his whole being become so different. So he outworks people so he doesn't have that feeling. It's like taking an antacid before your stomach starts to hurt, because you can't stand the pain when it does hurt. When it does start, you know what I mean? That's Coach Pitino coaching, and he really instilled that into us, and that's why some of us are pretty good coaches right now because of that. Losing is different, and I looked at losing like he looked at it, and you can't look at it like that anymore in today's society, because everybody wants to get a trophy. Coaching kids now is different, and it is. You can't be as tough on them. You can't. The verbiage has to change. Constructive criticism is like somebody telling you you're nothing. And then also, there's a lot more money involved now, and kids have a lot more leverage as far as transferring. So, college basketball and the landscape of it, and high school basketball too, is different. There's no loyalty. There's no pride. It's just about me, me, me. And as good as I was, a coach never had a problem with me. I never talked back to a coach. My mom never came up and questioned why the coach is doing this or doing that, playing me this way, playing me that way. Never. And that's all you see now. And it's unfortunate, and we all have to change as coaches. Some didn't want to. The Nick Sabans of the world said, no, I'm not changing. I made enough money I can afford to get out, and I have to coach in this era. Jay Wright, another one. The guy from Virginia, another one. And it's going to continue because the passion that you have in the profession is not the same. It's not about the best. And, I coach because I wanted to instill in something and really help kids become winners, make a certain impact on a young man, because there were people in my life that made an impact on me. And they weren't hard. They weren't easy on me. Basketball is easy. Life is hard. But the trials and tribulations and the experiences that you go through from your coach teaches you a lot of life lessons, especially in the business world, how to get along with people, how to be a good teammate, how to outwork people, because everybody wants the money. Everybody likes that profession, but who's going to set themselves apart? We were taught that, and, life is war, especially from a business standpoint. If you're trying to have financial gain and things like that, money just don't fall off trees. Well, it does, because, it's wood and it turns into paper. But what I'm saying is, just you being you and a nice guy doesn't get you anywhere. You got to be a competitor. This world is competitive. And Coach Pitino and the people that were in my life taught me how to be a competitor. And those other guys, too, they're not doing too bad either.
That's right. That's right. They aren't. And you have coached at the college level, and you've watched the game change and the players change. The environment around them has changed, but your passion for the game is still there. I see when we did a program for Glycod the other night about the high school season coming up, and in talking to coaches, I can see your enthusiasm and passion in talking to them and talking with other coaches about basketball. So you still have that passion,
no
but
doubt
you've
about it.
observed these changes, and there's got to be, I guess, some conflict in your mind about that as to.
Well, I would still coach. Don't get me wrong about it. I want to coach. There's no doubt about it. And maybe God has a way. This is His way of letting me see how other people are being successful doing it another way, being a little more passive, not understanding, because we all are understanding, but not as demanding. But you still have to have some type of order in any organization in order to be successful. My idol right now in coaching is Danny Hurley. I love Danny Hurley. He's rubbing people the wrong way now because all he's doing now is really complaining to the refs. I think he thinks he's entitled because he's won 2 national championships. Mm-hmm. Well, Mike Krzyzewski wasn't Mike Krzyzewski until he became who he was by winning. You know what I mean? He was almost fired.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know what I'm saying? 2 years before him going to the Final Four with Johnny Dawkins and Jay Billis and all those guys, they didn't even know how to pronounce his name. Didn't want to pronounce his name. He was a nobody. Now he's an icon. As a coach, most of us come from humble beginnings. A lot of us, grad assistants. Look at a lot of Coach Pitino's guys who were even coaching pros that were managers. One of the top high school basketball coaches in the state, Jeff Morrow, he was our manager. You got what's his name who coached the Indiana Pacers, in the NBA. He was a manager.
Yeah, Frank
Vogel.
Vogel. Yeah.
So there's levels to this and appreciation. And then when you get to that level, all you do is do the same thing that you were taught from a successful standpoint, but the kids now have changed. You ain't changed. Kids have changed. And there's such a disconnect now. Where it happened, it happened like overnight with me. But there's a difference. They don't look at it the way you do. They're not as passionate as you do. They may be passionate to get to the pros, but they're not passionate from a spiritual standpoint to where it's what you wear on your chest. The fans got me going. I love to, I was a great ball handler, so I love to hear somebody say, ooh, wow, great move.
Yeah.
I cared about that. Kids now don't care about that. It's too much at stake now. It's too much money. You got mid-major schools that are not even Power Fives that got to pay a kid $30,000, $40,000 just to come play for him. And then if he has a good year, he's looking on the internet and looking at the transfer portal. Well, if he got this amount of money, then shoot, I'm going to put myself in the transfer portal and see if I can get this. No matter what type of relationship he established with the coach or that community or that school, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about themselves. Everybody can't become pros, right? So from that standpoint, you try to get as much money as you possibly can in case you don't. And then when you get to the pros, some of these guys are making $1 million before they even get drafted. So they're soft. What is there to work for?
Right.
So it's different. And so you got, in order to be successful, one or two things got to happen. You got to make sure you recruit guys that don't think that way. But you can be fooled, too, because they'll tell you everything that you want to hear just to get to that situation. And then also, you got to don't take any job. I was in a position where I had to take the job that I can get. I didn't get it. I never had a chance to pick and choose my head coaching jobs. And so I don't have the same leverage, as these Power 5 guys who's established themselves. But now kids have started to become bigger than the program, bigger than the coach. If you call them anything out of their name or challenge them, they're calling the AD. Their parents are calling you. Everybody feels insulted. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure.
And that's not fun. no coach is going to coat their nose up, spite their face. No coach is going to really misuse a kid. But when it was war, athletics was war, that's how you had to do it. Even in the military, the greatest army of the world, boot camp was the toughest part of the deal. That's where you learned how to be a soldier. Well, same thing in athletics. Practice in whatever, that's where you set the tone. And you got to put them in adverse situations where kids don't want to be put in adverse situations. They'll quit before they really go through it, most of them. So that's not refreshing. That's not gratifying. And you're always the enemy if things don't work out for the kid. Maybe you didn't work on your game enough. But a coach is not playing you because he doesn't like you. A coach is not playing you because you're not doing the proper things on a consistent basis to help him win games, which is how he puts food on his table. So that's where the disconnect is. And also, after a season now, instead of, the kid coming in for a one-on-one meeting and you're normally talking about the things you need to do over the summer to get better, for us to be better as a team and for you to be a better basketball player the next year from a growth standpoint, right? That's not the conversation anymore. Coach, can I talk? Yeah. They're initiating the meeting now. How much money can you give me next year for NIL? Coach, what are you going to do for me as far as me trying to be a pro? Not how your grade's doing, what we need to do for you to stay on track to graduate, or even what you need to do to get better for our team to be better. It's about them. And if you're not satisfying them, okay, they're going to be one of 2,000 or 3,000 people that put themselves in the transfer portal to go to the next one. So me being who I am and the places that I had to coach, I had to make a living on those type of kids. In order to get the talent, they wanted to come to me for playing time. Now they're transferring for money.
Sure.
And how can they get to the pros?
Yeah, there's obviously some kind of structure is needed to have the game sustain itself, I would think, for the future. But it seems like every time you look at some sort of solution for establishing that structure, you open up about 10 more questions. Do you have a collective bargaining agreement? Well, if so, who represents the players? Who determines what that agreement is? Who signs off on it? Do you have a contract with players? I mean, all these things that the professionals had to solve when they first established themselves. Now it looks like college sports is facing that kind of challenge.
Don't be surprised within the next little bit, these college athletes are going to start a union. Mm-hmm. And is the NCAA going to be the brand of college athletics? Because there's no such word as amateurism anymore. You don't get a scholarship, 3 hots and a cot, books and fees and things like that. Now it's, you got to raise extra dollars. There's schools in the United States, or not Division I schools, who really don't have the budget to fund 13 full scholarships. Some schools where I coached at, I only could recruit 2 or 3 out-of-state kids because of out-of-state tuition. One school I coached at, we didn't even give our kids back their Pell Grant. Their Pell Grant was part of their scholarship. So things have changed. Now, can you imagine those schools are still the same? And how can they really compete when now with so much money involved and they didn't even have the resources to just stay status quo? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We won 17 straight NCAA tournament. They haven't won more than 10 games since I left. And it's going to be even harder because how are they going to get, student athletes to come to a place like that for nothing?
Or stay if they
Or
do
stay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, quick story. My best player of the year in the conference, had his dorm broken into. And I go up there and I said, "You all right? Did they take the, what did they, did they take your laptop? They took your Air Jordans. They took this, right? Coach, I don't care about that. I don't care about that." I said, "Well, what did they take then?" He goes, "They took my cigarettes." I looked at my assistant and I looked back at him. I said, "So you telling me you smoke cigarettes?" No, coach. That's my hustle. I sell them 2 for $1. I laughed and then I cried. Here's a guy who's helped me win a conference championship, undefeated in the league, second longest winning streak in the country. And I can't give him nothing, and he was forced, from a survival standpoint, to sell cigarettes on campus, 2 for $1, just to have some spending change in his pocket.
Yeah, and this is very, very recent. I mean, this
is very recent.
Yeah. Well, it's truly amazing how things have blown up, and it's nothing against players getting money, but it's just they've got to have some kind of system.
There's got to be a limit, and then if not, we got to have a contract. You know what I mean? If I give you this, you better, every time you miss a class, you're getting docked. Now, since we're treating you like pros.
Yeah.
It's just like when you're in the NBA, if you're late, if you do this, you break a rule, such and such, ain't no running. That you don't run pros. You don't put them on the line. You dock them, right?
Right.
So there's got to be something contractual to hold these kids accountable and hold their feet to the fire. They can quit on you. They can become the locker room lawyer and have the whole team turn against you, and you still got to pay them. You know? That ain't fair. That ain't right. That's not teaching them. They're causing grief with you, and then you're not winning because your locker room's messed up. Okay? And now the AD's looking at you like, but AD, you're the one who voted, you and the president voted on this deal to put us in this situation. All right? Now my job's in jeopardy because this is what I can get, and you're making me pay this kid. You know.
I'll tell you what. Let me go back to simpler times back in 1992 and ask you a question again about your Unforgettables teammates as a way of sort of wrapping things up. But after all these years, I guess it's a good thing that you all really liked each other, because you've certainly become linked forever, and you still have reunions and still have a chance to get together. What has that relationship with those guys meant over the years?
It's a love affair that no one will ever understand. I'd kill a rock for John Pelphrey, Deron Feldhaus, and Richie Farmer. And they do the same for me. What we went through, we couldn't have made it through without each other. There's no way. And I'm sorry, I'm getting teary-eyed a little bit, but there's no way we could have made it without each other. He pushed us that hard, and he had to. It wasn't a bad thing. And the reason why I am so adamant about kids being coached and being put in adverse situations, it allowed us to grow. It allowed us to learn how to depend on others. It made us so close that we had no choice. And now, as we are adults, that year when we got done, when we lost on March 28, 1992, our parents even went through withdrawals. We took everybody on a magical ride. But people don't know behind the scenes what it took for us to have that magical ride. The sacrifices, not being a normal college student, having to run extra, having to practice 2-3 times a day. I was so glad when the 20-hour rule came, and that still wasn't enough. He got every ounce of 20 hours a week that any coach in America got out of. And the appreciation for all of us sticking in with each other, we can't even get mad at each other. Like Pell and I, we argue like brothers. You know, we can be smart aleck with each other, but can't nobody else do that. And I love him. I mean, you know, from Mr. Jack to Miss Jenny Pelphrey to Miss Dottie Feldhaus to Coach Feldhaus to, you know, Mr. Richard and Miss Farmer, and my mom and dad. You know, my parents are the only ones that are deceased besides Darren's dad. But we're family, and we always will be. And, you know, it was good for Coach to come back that day. That brought back a lot of stuff, you know, because he didn't leave here on a bad note. He left from financial reasons, and you can't, you know, you can't blame him. But he's really now showing you that money isn't everything, because he'd give anything to be still the coach here at the University of Kentucky. And I just hope, I wish everyone can have the basketball experience that I had. And I did my best as a coach, and still will, to try to let other young men experience what I did. It'll be hard to do. Even my son, he played for me. And I try to give him all that the experience that I had. Unfortunately, we were at places where they just didn't want to be excellent, but I still became excellent. But it's tough. These guys here, that 1992 year with Jamal Mashburn was probably, there needs to be a real book and a real movie made about how Kentucky basketball got to today. And it started in 1989-1990 season. And I am not ashamed, not afraid to say that our shoulders are still carrying that load, because that's where it started. And it started with Rick Pitino and how he did it, the staff that he put together, the chances that he took. He wasn't afraid to push us to the limit, but we allowed him to. No one budged. Mm-hmm. You know, now you can't coach kids half that way, or even get them to appreciate what they're doing and the platform that they have. They don't see that far. You know, money was never an issue for us. If it was, by us being the most popular team in America, I mean, in Kentucky basketball history, playing in probably the best game in college basketball history, how much money do you think we could have made?
I would say more than
and
a
we
little.
did and we had a very successful barnstorming tour. But just think, you know, Rex Chapman coming in here, Sam Bowie, come on, Kenny Walker, Jack Givens, Ralph Beard, come on.
Yeah.
You know, now you got kids, you got a whole era that knows nothing about the tradition of Kentucky basketball players. That's sad. There's a reason why God put in Mitch Barnhart's heart to bring somebody in that appreciates and knows what this is all about. And he'll die trying to implement what was instilled in him about what it means and what it's all about to be a Kentucky basketball player. Is it about banners? Yeah. But if you do it right, the banners will come. He's doing it right. He's heading in the right direction. I think the sun is shining bright, coming down on Kentucky basketball again. And I'm just hope I can just continue to enjoy the ride while I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to do in my time of transition.
Well, the Unforgettables are just that, and of course you were a huge part of things as Rick Pitino and your teammates turned things around back in the early 90s, and you're still appreciated for that by the UK fan base, and we'll see what happens this year. There is a lot of excitement now, but today, thanks very much for doing this, Sean. Much appreciated.
No doubt about it. Appreciate you.
You've been listening to the WUKY Sports Page with your host, Keith Elkins, an exclusive podcast from 91.3 WUKY, produced at the WUKY studios by Alan Lytle. Our theme music is Peanut Butter and Jam by Illogical Bit, available at soundcloud.com/illogicalbit. Subscribe to the Sports Page through iTunes, Google Play, or at our website, WUKY.org.